Major developments as Microsoft held a press conference today in Brussels where everybody is meeting to talk with the European Commission about how they want the Activision deal to go through with Microsoft or why they don't want it to go through. Phil Spencer's in attendance. Brad Smith is in attendance. Jim Ryan is in attendance also. A lot of big names are there, and some new support for the deal came after a big announcement from Microsoft and Nvidia where Microsoft has confirmed that games going forward will be coming to the Nvidia platform. Let's talk about everything that happened right now. So the long and the short of it is Microsoft had this huge event today, and I'm actually there's two sources. So I'll go over some of the interesting points made on Eurogamer.net, but Jez Corden also covered this. So we're going to read from the bottom up about the event. So they confirmed that they are at the event, and they said today's hearing was closed to press, though we've heard whispered via Eurogamer's better dressed business sibling, GameIndustry.biz, that Microsoft and Sony remain at loggerheads, a standstill, despite efforts to find an agreement over matters such as Call of Duty. Now, Xbox actually brought a document in an envelope ready to be signed by Sony, but nothing happened. Anyway, continuing on. Microsoft's president Brad Smith and Xbox Phil Spencer are in the building. And Phil Spencer actually tweeted about the deal with Nvidia, saying the following: we have signed a 10-year agreement with Nvidia that will allow GeForce Now players to stream Xbox PC games as well as Activision Blizzard PC titles, including COD, following the acquisition. We're committed to bringing more games to more people, however they choose to play. This is also reported on by CNBC. Microsoft will bring Xbox games to Nvidia's cloud gaming service, and basically this is happening effective immediately, according to this announcement. Microsoft Brad Smith said at a press conference that effective immediately, its Xbox games will be available on Nvidia's GeForce Now cloud gaming service. Smith said if the Activision deal closes, it will bring all Activision Blizzard titles to GeForce Now. This was one of the areas where there was a lot of concern about the cloud gaming market. So this is part of their strategy to convince the regulators that, hey, this deal should go through. Look, we're bringing this to more places than ever before, and we'll get to that in just a second. Continuing on, Sony's Jim Ryan and Activision Blizzard boss Bobby Kotick were also present at today's hearing, though not expected to put in an appearance tonight. So, sorry, that was from Eurogamer.biz. Two things are happening right now. One, the hearing is happening, and then separately, they had a little press briefing after the hearing, I believe, is when it took place. And, Jim Ryan obviously was there. Bobby Kotick was there. And then we get a little bit of details from Microsoft. Microsoft is announcing a deal with Nvidia's GeForce. Brad Smith says Xbox games will be available via GeForce Now, and this deal will include Activision Blizzard titles such as Call of Duty if and when Xbox owns it. Smith continues by listing other companies supporting the deal: small European developers, Valve, now Nvidia, Nintendo. Microsoft is open to a deal with guardrails to appease regulators around the world, Smith says. But think about the market in Europe, Smith says, pointing to a graphic who shows PlayStation has 80% of the gaming market in Europe and Xbox has 20%. Now, Jez Corden actually has images. So let's switch over to Jez's recounting of what happened there right now. At a press conference in Brussels, Microsoft President Brad Smith just announced all Xbox PC games will come to competing cloud services, Nvidia GeForce Now, and Nvidia now supports the deal. Nvidia was one of the companies that were sort of on the fence, and they've changed their mind. So that leaves Google and Sony as the detractors so far. Microsoft describes how Sony beats Xbox market share globally to the tune of 75% versus 25% in Japan. It's 96% to 4% comparing between the two. With Nintendo, we're bringing Call of Duty to 150 million more consoles that wouldn't have had it previously. Brad Smith describes a 2009 partnership with the EU to promote interoperability between Windows and other platforms like Google Documents, and how that deal was far more complex than what's going on with Activision. Brad Smith literally has the document for Sony to sign to get Call of Duty for 10 years here, ready and eager to dialogue with Sony. No agreements yet. And if we hop back on over to Eurogamer.net, they actually have an image of him holding up the document. We're going to continue on reading about what has been said at this event. But before I continue on, if you like my channel and you like getting these updates as regular as I can bring them, please consider hitting that subscribe button, hitting that bell to know when my content goes live. I greatly appreciate you watching this far. A very unexpected news-heavy day. Half of you aren't subscribed. Hit that subscribe button. Help me hit that goal of 100K sooner rather than later so that we can keep covering this stuff for you. I really like it. Anyway, here we go. But think about the market in Europe, Smith says, pointing to a graphic who shows PlayStation has 80% of the gaming market in Europe and Xbox has 20%. It would be tempting to hold onto that 80% share, but that's not where the cross-platform future of the gaming industry is headed, Smith continues. Today's announcement with Nintendo and Nvidia mean Call of Duty will be on 150 million devices. He specifies devices, not consoles, that don't have Call of Duty today. Smith calls for leadership of the European Commission to get the deal done, calling back to deals going back 30 years on Microsoft Windows hardware and PCs. I stopped highlighting after this because it was all important. Those deals, including squabbles on PC file formats, were far more complex than that of the Activision Blizzard deal, just less controversial. And if we scroll up here, they actually have an image of him holding up the document saying, hey, here's the document showing, or that we're ready to have Sony sign. And you can see it here. So he actually brought a physical document for them to sign right then and there. Now, here's the thing. If you look at the stats and believe them for Microsoft, they are not in any danger of like overtaking the entire industry in Europe because they own Activision Blizzard. When another company has 80% and they have 20%, that's not great. And it's 96-6 in Japan. We know America, it's closer, but it's a little strange to me that when you look at it on paper, it doesn't really make sense why it would be blocked, especially when there is a contract in their hands ready for Sony to sign to basically allow parity for release of Call of Duty on their platforms. Anyway, remedies to keep Call of Duty accessible to all could include putting the game on cloud elsewhere or via PC using Chrome OS, Smith says. Smith has produced an envelope containing the deal paperwork he hopes Sony will sign, but it hasn't yet. He's waiting with a pen or with Microsoft Office to print it off for them. In the Q&A, somebody asked something about Sony. Sony can spend all its energy trying to block the deal by blocking competition, or it can sit down with us to hammer out an agreement addressing its concerns, Smith says by way of an answer. And you know, it's just really interesting that Sony has made all these efforts to block the deal because that makes sense to me from a business perspective. They want it blocked because it's better for them that they continue getting Call of Duty at a discount. But I mean, if you hit Bobby Kotick in the pocketbook, I have to imagine that when the dust settles from all this, even if it fails, I wonder if those contracts are going to be adjusted accordingly based on the billions of dollars that you're going to cost Activision, Microsoft, and everybody else. Like, it's going to be really, really nasty afterwards. And if the deal goes through, I guess they lose it anyway. Sony's in a position where they should just sit on their hands and not do anything. And they know that. They want the commission to have all the reasons possible to block this deal. So they're just not going to do anything. And that's their move. Smith is more optimistic of getting the deal done than he was 24 hours ago, but not because of what was said in the room today, he says. Instead, he points to the Nintendo and Nvidia deals Microsoft has announced today. Those give him more confidence, he says. To me, it feels like Microsoft is leaning on those deals as a sign of progress. This is from the writer, which were clearly made to be ready today in the event Sony didn't play ball. We didn't think it's feasible or realistic to think one game or one slice can be carved out from the rest, Smith says, when asking if losing Call of Duty would make the deal work. So we don't think it's feasible or realistic to think one game or one slice can be carved out from the rest, Smith says, when asked if losing Call of Duty would make the deal work. So I think what he's saying there is basically a divestiture. Divestiture is not an answer for Microsoft. So if that's the only solution presented, I do not think that they're going to move forward with the acquisition. They're just like, no, we're just not going to do that. So we need to come up with some other type of agreement. And I have to wonder, what is that like? I don't really understand what that process is like with the EU and the CMA. That's one question I have. Like, does Microsoft just put something together and they're like, well, here's our best shot, and then they just say no and the deal's dead? Or is it, well, if you change, you have to change these things, and then it's like a conversation, and then they negotiate until they come to an understanding? Like, if that's how it is, I think they figure it out and the deal goes through for sure. And I still think largely that the deal will likely go through. I mean, you're looking at 2.5 billion or something like that if it fails at this point. So it'll be interesting either way. Smith says in his view, the UK regulator did not completely shut the door on behavioral remedies rather than structural ones. In other words, he believes there's still wiggle room to get Activision Blizzard King whole. And there he is holding the Blizzard contract. Smith is arguing that Microsoft is not spending $69 billion to keep Call of Duty on Xbox, but to make it more accessible, including in the mobile space. We will make sure our games work the way people expect with high technical standards, Smith says, of how Activision Blizzard games like Call of Duty might play on Nintendo platforms or Nvidia. Today's Nintendo deal relates to current and future Xbox titles for now. Current and future. That's interesting. And then Activision Blizzard games if the buyout is included. Was there a Nintendo deal? Let me just look up Nintendo really quick. In December, Microsoft said it had entered a 10-year deal with Nintendo. Yeah, so they have a legal agreement to bring Call of Duty to Nintendo players. Okay. Sorry, I was a little curious if I thought that statement was saying, so if like we read that again, I thought they were saying that there were other deals besides Call of Duty with Nintendo. Today's Nintendo deal relates to current and future Xbox titles for now, and then Activision Blizzard games if the buyout is included. I wonder if that's a typo from Tom Phillips. Anyway, Smith is being asked again about losing Call of Duty or a specific part of Activision Blizzard to get the deal done, as the UK regulators have suggested will be necessary. It's not what Microsoft is interested in, he said. So there it is. They're not going to divest. He's saying straight up, we're not going to divest. We're not interested in it. If we can't have the whole thing, we don't want it. So if that is the only solution for everybody, he's like, nope. He's being pretty straightforward that that is not an option for them. Cross-platform is the best strategy for the future for developers and players, which is what today's Nintendo and Nvidia deals will provide. I'm going to Google really quick Nintendo Xbox and just see if any news. Yeah. Okay. So this just broke. Like, what? Nintendo signs 10-year contract to bring Xbox games to Nintendo consoles. So it wasn't just Nvidia. Microsoft's president and vice chairman Brad Smith announced today that the company signed a 10-year contract to bring Xbox games. That's more than Call of Duty. Did I miss this? I must have missed this earlier. And he said it on Twitter. To announce the binding contract promising to drop Xbox games and Activision titles like Call of Duty on Nintendo hardware at the same time these games hit Xbox consoles. Yes. So I actually had this up earlier, and then the EU stuff broke, so I got a little sidetracked. We've now signed a binding 10-year contract to bring Xbox games to Nintendo's gamers. This is just part of our commitment to bring Xbox games and Activision titles like Call of Duty to more players on more platforms. They've signed a binding 10-year legal agreement to bring Call of Duty to Nintendo players the same day as Xbox with full feature and content parity, so they can experience Call of Duty just as Xbox and PlayStation gamers enjoy Call of Duty. We are committed to providing long-term equal access to Call of Duty to other gaming platforms, bringing more choice to more players and more competition to the gaming market. Now, they specify Call of Duty here, but Brad Smith is actually saying Xbox games. And to me, that is a bigger story than just Call of Duty. That is all Xbox games, not just one property. Well, let's get through this thing. This video ended up being longer than I thought. Anyway, Microsoft's closing message is that the main issue regulators have with the deal is that Call of Duty will become more exclusive, which these deals show is not the case. And Microsoft leaves the stage. And then he has some comments, though, about the press conference. Let's see what Jez finished off on. We don't think it's reasonable or realistic for one part of the Activision Blizzard deal to be carved out, he says about divesting, basically. The future is cross-platform, and then just has a picture of himself there. Really, really interesting stuff. So basically, it seems like a divestiture is not an option for them, and they are not willing to commit to that. Call of Duty will come to Nvidia. Xbox games, including Call of Duty, will come to Nintendo, which is very interesting news. What that means for the future will be cool. Like, I can't wait to see Xbox games on more platforms. I think Xbox has basically said, we don't mind our properties being on other platforms. And I have to wonder if does that mean Bethesda games? Because like Starfield currently is Xbox only. Does that mean someday Starfield will come out on other platforms, regardless of the fact that Microsoft owns Bethesda Game Studios? I'm very curious to read more about that. Maybe it's time for a separate video. Hey, half of you aren't subscribed right now. And if you subscribe right now, I would hit my goal of hitting 100,000 subscribers. Thank you so much for watching. You have to do that on youtube.com, by the way. I don't think you can do it on Facebook. Somebody pointed out to me. So please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell, and I'd hit my goal. If you all did it, I would hit my goal of 100,000 subscribers today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to the members for supporting this channel. I really appreciate you. What a cool news story today. A lot of interesting stuff to think about. Hit that join button if you don't like the ads on these videos. I post these out ads for all members. Thank you so much for watching. Here is my video from yesterday talking about the latest from the deal and what to expect. And hit that subscribe if you haven't yet. I'm going to get out of here, and I'll see you for the next one.